Good afternoon, I'm your host, Brian Buckmire, here at the Law&Crime Trial Network. What a great show do we have for you today. Quite an interesting case we've got here. So again, that case is dark for today, expecting to be opening back up on Tuesday, but of course I am joined with our great set of guests, Catherine Smith, as well as Horrendous. Guys, how are you guys doing today?
Good, thanks for having us.
Great, always a pleasure. So, retrial, quadruple murder, dead girlfriend, 3 children, maybe a Mexican cartel. I mean, you couldn't ask for better TV. Katie Smith, will start with you. As we're going through the injuries, I mean, they sound horrendous, horrible. I mean, the stuff that keeps you up at night. Is this something that we're just gonna kind of put to the side and say, hey, that's the Mexican cartel, that's how they kill people, they got their trademarks, or is this something the defense attorney should really be wrestling with as to how these injuries occurred or how bad they were?
Well, you always run that risk when the injuries are so severe that the jury wants to convict someone, and that someone might be sitting right at the defense table, so you run that risk. But then there's this idea of overkill, right? Like, one of these people were his own children, or his own child, so it doesn't seem to me to match.
Yeah, we were saying the same thing earlier off the air, Mike, where ex-girlfriend, I get it, there can be bad blood. Her children from a different marriage, maybe you're a very callous person, you don't care. But to treat your own child the same way, I think for a lot of us, we're like, that doesn't make sense. There should be some difference in how, if he did this, there should have been some sort of difference in how he treated his own child from the other 3. Does this make sense to you, or am I just making something out of nothing?
No, I think it's a very good argument, and I think it's a very good argument for the defense. And I think the prosecutors would jump on that, because everything's a lot of times a double-edged sword, and saying that this was an act of someone who was so depraved and was in such a frenzy and such an anger fit that they couldn't differentiate. However, I think for the defense, that is a very good argument. And I think you really would hit with the jurors, because it's all about relating to the jurors. Most of the jurors, I'm sure, have children, things of that nature, and that's something they would have to internalize. Would I have the capability of doing it? Something of that nature. And I think that would be a very strong point. And I think at the end of the day, it would be a point that would win out.
Yeah, and the one thing I wish we could do, and I get it for privacy issues, we can't. I would love to be able to record the voir dire, the jury selection, because I know this is going to topic that's going to come up and a theme that's going to drive through. So, Katie, kind of making you the defense attorney here in this case, how would you address the jury selection for this type of case to carry on your theme or your defense going through the trial?
I think one of the greatest points was what the defense actually hit in their opening, a quote from their own client, which was something along the lines of, "Ain't no black man anywhere going to kill somebody over child support." And I think that that really resonates with me. I would try to get people on the jury who have children who possibly owe child support, because to me that seems like such a thin motive.
Yeah, especially when you think about how much money he was coming in and his working situation. We want to show you more of the testimony from the Emmy, again, describing Brandy's injuries. All right, so just more of the heinous injuries that Brandy Peters had faced. There obviously was a struggle there. Mike Horrendous, only bringing in on this question, acrylic nails pulled back. Her hands bludgeoned like she's punching something hard and defending herself. There's obviously was a struggle here. Would this case not then heavily depend on the DNA evidence of, is Henry Segura's DNA in the home? Is it under her fingernails? Is it on her hands? Like, there's got to be something that truly points to it. Or if there's a question mark and there's some unknown DNA, does that not help the defense in saying, hey, Mexican cartel, it's those guys?
I mean, this case is one of the most interesting cases I think we've followed since at least I've been doing the show. And we were talking about that off camera. And one of the reasons is it's very rare that a defense can actually point to someone else and have some really solid evidence. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the defense is going to put the prosecution on trial, and why didn't you investigate this further? Because I, like you, think, Brian, this has cartel kind of, this is the kind of thing that sends a message. I don't think somebody wants to send a message to probation about child support and how much I owed. This is brutal. Her DNA from him is very explainable. I mean, anybody who does anything, I mean, DNA, if you're living together, DNA could be transferred in a washing machine from one item of clothing to the next. That's proven. I've had experts testify to that. But here you have some mystery DNA. Where did it come from? Who does it go to? And that's an interesting and strong defense.
Yeah, it's interesting, Katie, we were talking about this yesterday, where I think at its heart, this case is really about the standard of proof. It's about beyond a reasonable doubt. It's what the jury is willing to believe and honestly think could have happened. And when I think of it that way, I think to myself, hey, unless the prosecution disproved this whole cartel thing, it sounds real plausible, and that's enough for reasonable doubt. So I'm always come back to, why was it 8-4 to acquit and not 12-0? Like, it doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense to me either, because the quantum of objective forensic evidence that does not point to the defendant is huge. And on its face, I don't understand why they pushed this to a retrial. I just don't think that the evidence is there.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting case. I think the defense has a lot to work with, and the prosecution definitely got to figure something out if they want to get the verdict they're looking for. But we're going to continue with more readbacks and looking at some of the testimony in this case after the break.